I'm just going to hand over to John Smith now. We're delighted he's here. The Contemporary Art Talks programme has been running for about 5 years now, and it's the first time that we've actually, through popular demand, asked somebody to come back to speak again. So, welcome, John.
Thank you. Got to remember a bit of Hello, is that right? People hear me? Yeah? Thanks. Yeah, nice to be here with such a little intimate audience. Most of my art school gigs are not really to this many people, so I was just saying I did a screening last night and then spent most of the day trying to deal with an injured cat that I found in my front garden, so I'm a bit harassed and things, but hopefully everything's calm now, but I'll try and be coherent. I'm just going to show a mixed program of work going back to some very early stuff at the beginning and some very recent stuff at the end, so I'm going to miss out about 20 years in my career, but I'm going to show just under an hour of films, or about 53 minutes of films. I am going to start, I'll talk a little bit about some of the films in between them, but I don't like to say anything about films before I show them, so generally what I'll do is I'll stop a couple of times during the programme and talk a bit, and obviously leave plenty of time at the end for us to talk. But if there's got any questions or comments, which I hope out this many audience, quite a few of you will. So I'm going to start with 3 short films. I think the order I'm going to show them in. I'm going to start with a film called On from 1986, which is 4 minutes long. Then a film called Associations from one of the earliest films that I made that I still show. Associations from 1975, and it was made while I was still a student at the RCA, but it's one of a couple of films that I made at that time. I still show quite a lot. And then I'm going to show a 1 minute film called Gargantuan from 1992. So the first 2 films I don't want to tell anything about, but the third one, maybe it's good if you know the context for it. The 1 minute film was made for an arts magazine programme, used to be on BBC Two, called The Late Show. And over a number of years in the late 80s and early 90s, they commissioned quite a few artists to make these kind of 1 minute interventions into this arts programme. So the brief for the film was that it had to be 1 minute long. So as you'll see from Gargantuan, that formed the basis of the idea for the film. It's exactly 1 minute long. So I'm going to show those 3 films, the tiny pause in between my change of files, and then I'll talk a little bit about what we can see next. Switch this on.
The free association game has been played for centuries. It requires only a stimulus, a referee, and a player who is willing to follow the simple rule, say the first thing that comes to mind when the stimulus is presented to them. When the game is further restricted to single words, as both stimuli and responses, it is more properly called the word association game. Unlike conversation or the other language games we play daily, the word association game is an artificial, derivative phenomenon, important not because it is interesting in itself, but because it reveals properties of linguistic mechanisms underlying it. Our ability to produce associations is presumably derived from our ability to understand and produce language. For this reason, language must play a central role in the explanation of these associations. Word associations have not always been thought of in this way, and even now most psychologists treat word association in the way the British empiricists have done for several centuries. For these psychologists, two words become associated with each other when the two are experienced in temporal contiguity. Quite recently, however, this simple, hence attractive theory has been severely criticized for a variety of reasons. Chomsky, 1959, McNeill, 1966, Clifton, 1967. Most important among these reasons is that association theory cannot account for language comprehension and production. Language, the critics say, should not be thought of as a consequence of built-up associations. Rather, word associations should be thought of as a consequence of linguistic competence. Word associations have characteristically different effects depending on the rules the player has followed. When the player is allowed to take his time, he generally reacts with rich images, memories, or exotic verbal associations, and these give way to idiosyncratic, often personally revealing, one-word responses. But when he is urged to respond quickly, his associations become more superficial, less idiosyncratic, and more closely related in an obvious way to the stimulus. These responses are much more predictable in that they are the ones almost everyone else gives to the stimulus. But if he has to respond even more quickly, the player will ignore even the meaning of the stimulus and produce clang responses, words that sound like or rhyme with the stimulus. Of these three categories, it is the second that is most dependent on linguistic competence. But there are important differences even among these fast, meaningful responses. The common associations, i.e., the responses other people are most likely to give, are produced more quickly than the uncommon ones. This suggests that we can attach greater importance to the fastest, most frequent associations, for hypothetically, they are the product of the basic association mechanisms. Even the most preliminary analysis of the word association game reveals its kinship with language comprehension and production. The game has 3 identifiable stages. 1. The player must understand the stimulus. 2. He must operate on the meaning of the stimulus. And 3. He must produce a response. It is the unique second stage that clearly sets this game apart from normal language mechanisms. It contains an associating mechanism which, through its associating rules, fixes the response of the third stage. I will go into these associating rules in some detail, but only after examining what is known about understanding and producing sentences, the counterparts of the first and third stages in word association. According to one current linguistic theory, Katz and Fodor, 1963, Katz and Postal, 1964, Chomsky, 1965. The meaning of a sentence consists essentially of its deep structure relations plus the dictionary entries of the lexical items inserted into this deep structure. There also is some psychological evidence to suggest that comprehension involves coming to know the deep structure evidence to suggest that comprehension involves...
Gargantuan amphibian, enormous amphibian, huge amphibian, big amphibian, strapping amphibian, ample amphibian, medium amphibian, average amphibian, regular amphibian, typical amphibian, oh, little amphibian, modest amphibian, scanty amphibian, petite amphibian, tiny amphibian, diminutive amphibian, weeny amphibian, minuscule amphibian, minute. I love minute. Oh, it's a bit like last order or something. Another one. I'll do the aisle next time. Instead. Yeah, as I hope is clear from seeing those first 3 films, I'm really interested in ambiguity and how things can represent different things depending on the context they're presented in. So very often in almost all of my work I kind of set up expectations which end up to be giving something else than you were originally led to expect. Sorry?
Can you turn your mic up?
Ah. It's not on. better? No? No? Not working? Oh, where's it gone? It's here. It's not working. Sorry, just... Use that one? This one? Oh, this one? Alright, that's not so big. Is that one working as well? Hello. Oh, I'm just going to little lie down. Yeah, that's good. Is that okay now? Yeah. Shall I start again, Emma? What I was saying very briefly is I'm really interested in ambiguity and in how context affects how we read information. And of course, film is a very good medium for experimenting with those ideas of context, because through the construction of a film we create a context. So whether that's through editing, what image we put against another, through what the camera reveals over time, or through the juxtaposition of sound and image. So all of those things, of course, affect each other. I guess the first film I showed, in a way, is sort of perhaps the purest kind of representation of that kind of idea that I've made, because with basically every kind of signifier that you see at the beginning of the film turns out to actually be something else than you were led to expect at the beginning. So I quite like having this kind of playful game with audiences, but it's also a bit based on that premise that the fact that none of us do see the world in the same way, that none of us actually do perceive things identically to each other. We've got this thing called verbal language, which sort of tries to objectify as much as possible our communication between of ideas between each other, but and it does a pretty good job. But in a way, it's a bit of tricks us a little bit sometimes into thinking that maybe the world is a more objective place than it really is. I'm not going to hang around. I think there's quite a few films I wanted to show, so I'm going to just move on to the next film. The longest piece I'm going to show is called The Black Tower. Probably made, like a lot of my work, made over about 3 years. A lot of my longer films were made over a long period of time, because I'm very often interested in how things in the world change over time. So, but The Black Tower is sort of one of the films I show a lot, because it actually combines quite a lot of ideas, elements that I'm interested in. So the films you've seen so far are all kind of one-liners in a way, whereas The Black Tower actually is very deliberately a very hybrid film that brings together a lot of different kind of ideas and kind of tries to knit together lots of different things. So I think the best thing to do is show it to you and then talk a little bit about it after you've seen it.
I first noticed it in spring last year. It must have been early April. I remember it well. It was a Saturday morning and I'd been to the corner shop to buy some food for a fried breakfast. For some reason the shop was closed, so I decided to cut through the back street to the supermarket on the high road. It was a bright morning, but most of the street was still in shadow, and I found myself walking very close to the front walls and hedges in order to expose my face to the thin strip of warm sunlight that ran the length of the street. It was from here that I first saw it, its crest protruding over the roofs on the other side of the road. Surprised that I hadn't noticed it before, I wondered what it was and then forgot about it for several weeks. On April the 28th, I was late for an appointment. I'd left my car lights on overnight and had to get a jump start from a passing van. Waiting to turn into Crownfield Road, I saw the tower through the gap between two blocks of flats. It seemed very close. As far as I could remember, the road I'd first spotted it from was nearly a mile away. I didn't have time to stop and work out the geography, but that evening I mentioned the tower to my next door neighbour as I wondered what it was used for. She said that she'd never seen it. A few weeks later, I went to visit a friend in Brixton Prison. I couldn't face driving through town in the rush hour, so I went by bus. It turned out to be a depressing meeting, as my friend had just heard that he'd been refused parole. Waiting outside for the bus home, I noticed a familiar structure inside the prison walls. I decided that it was some kind of water tower, but I was surprised that the design was the same as the one near my home. I was even more surprised when the bus stopped outside a factory and I noticed another identical building inside its grounds. I decided to take another look at the town in my house when I got back, but by the time I got there it was dark. There was no moon and I couldn't see it over the rooftops. That night I dreamt that I was imprisoned in the tower. My body was paralysed and only my eyes could move. At first I thought that I was in complete darkness, but after a while I noticed a greyish speck which remained in the same place when I moved my eyes. I realised that I was facing a flat black wall. I got the feeling that the room was in fact brightly lit, but I couldn't be sure. The tea's maid woke me up at 8:30 and I jumped out of bed and rushed across the room to switch it off. It had rained again during the night, but I drew open the curtains to discover that the morning sky was bright and clear. Shivering, I quickly put on my clothes and lit the fire. In the kitchen, I poured myself some fruit juice and made porridge. While waiting for it to cook, I did the washing up from the night before. The tower was still on my mind, so after breakfast I went out to take a closer look at it and find out exactly what it was used for. When I got to the place where I first spotted it, it was nowhere to be seen. I walked back along the road nearer to the front gardens. I even stood on the garden walls, but I still couldn't see anything over the rooftops. I walked the surrounding streets in case I'd taken the wrong turning, but there was still no sign of the tower. I went back to Crownfield Road and I couldn't see it from there either, so I went into the newsagents on the other side of the street and asked the man there what had happened to the tower. To my great relief, he told me it had been demolished the previous week. I bought the local paper and left the shop. It started to rain. I felt like getting out of London for a while. When I got home, I put some coal on the fire and started looking at the newspaper. It had got very wet and the pages were stuck together. I found it very difficult to read as the reverse type on the back of each page was almost as clear as the front. I laid the paper out in front of the fire and fell asleep in the armchair. I was woken up by the smell of burning and opened my eyes to see the rising smoke. I stamped out the flaming edge of the newspaper and my eyes focused on an article about the tower block demolition on Hackney Marshes the previous Sunday. I looked at the photograph of the leaning building and remembered my conversation with the newsagent. I decided to go back to his shop. Our second conversation confirmed my suspicions. He had been talking about the tower block. When I described what the black tower looked like and pointed to where it had been, he just stared at me. I left the shop and leant against the lamppost outside, trying to control my breathing. I stared at the space where the black tower had been, trying to collect my thoughts. Two boys came by eating chips. I tried to ask them about the tower, but they ran away before I could finish my sentence. I stopped a woman pushing a pram full of groceries, but she ignored me completely. I started walking home. One of my shoelaces had come undone, and my shoes slipped uncomfortably against my heel as I walked. Outside St Mary's Church, I bent down to retie it, and looking up from the pavement again, I saw the tower behind the church roof. I panicked and started running, but when I got to the end of the street, the tower was there waiting for me. I turned the corner and saw it again. I kept running, taking different turnings, but whenever I looked up, I saw the tower. Whichever way I ran, it was always in front of me. tower staring back at me. They got darker and darker, and the mass of the tower seemed to press against my forehead, force the back of my head into the pillow. I tried to keep my eyes open and stared at the sleeping Mexican who sat cross-legged on the ceiling. A huge sombrero was shielding his eyes from the blazing sun. Eventually, the light faded, and I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. I awoke feeling strangely calm. I cooked myself a fried breakfast and started to take stock of my situation. It seemed as though I would have to stay at home from now on, as there was little doubt that I would encounter the tower again if I went out. I resigned myself to my fate. The days passed quickly at first, as I was spending most of my time working on this script. Writing had never come easily to me, and I found the pacing of dramatic fiction extremely challenging. In some ways, I appreciated my incarceration, as it forced me to keep working. After my food supply ran out, I lived on ice creams, which I bought from the van, which came down my street every afternoon. For a while, I ate mainly choc ices, but I soon started to feel very unhealthy, so I went over to strawberry midges for the vitamin C. I started to lose track of time and spent months sitting at my desk, staring out of the window, always downwards in case the familiar shape appeared over the rooftops. I took to wearing a cap with a large peak, so that there was no danger of the tower appearing on the periphery of my vision. The arrival of the ice cream van became the high point of my day. I don't know who called the ambulance, but I was glad when it arrived. At first, I thought it was the ice cream van and wondered why it was playing a different tune. When we arrived at the hospital, I was not surprised by the architecture. My recovery took several months, but the doctors were sympathetic, and for the first time I was able to talk about the tower in detail without feeling that my audience would like to change the subject. As the weeks went by, my obsession diminished, and by the time I was discharged, it had become clear to me that the tower had only existed in my mind. It was suggested that I should convalesce in the country, so I arranged to visit some friends in Shropshire. I felt rather apprehensive about socialising with people again after so long, but my friends were very understanding and left me to my own devices. The weather was fine, so I spent most of my time exploring the countryside. I didn't feel afraid when I saw the tower again. Instead, I could only laugh as it looked so absurd peering at me through the trees. I felt my old curiosity returning. I wondered how it had found me. I made my way through the woods and came upon the tower standing alone in a clearing. It was even bigger than I'd imagined, and close up it showed signs of age and decay, which had been indistinguishable at a distance. I opened the door and stepped into the darkness.
I first noticed it a few weeks after his death. I remember the day well. It was the first time I went to visit his grave. It was a bright morning, so I did a bit of washing and messed about in the garden for a couple of hours before catching the train to the cemetery. it took me ages to find the place where he was buried. The cemetery was enormous, and the new grave was still marked with only a small wooden cross. I sat down beside it and wondered what epitaph would be carved in the stone. I closed my eyes and felt the warm sun on my face. When I opened them again, I found myself staring at the tower. Surprised I hadn't noticed it before, I wondered what it was, then forgot about it for a few weeks.
Light working now? Light working? Okay. In case you were wondering, it's only one tower. When I first made that film, I got a bit disappointed sometimes when people had seen it and asked me, and quite often people said, how did you find all those identical towers in different places? And other people assumed that it was a special effect, that I could superimpose this building onto the landscape. And the reason I was disappointed with that was that one of the main ideas behind the film is really to kind of explore and kind of expose the power of language to kind of suggest that images are something other than they really are. So basically the images of the tower that you see in the film are just the same building shot from different angles. And so it's just very carefully framed to suggest that it's in different places so that the voice actually obviously reinforces and actually constructs that image. So that was a very, very important thing to me. Quite often people say, what about the story then? What's that all about? And in fact, the details of the story of the film I'm not particularly interested in at all. It was more what the story does that I was interested in. So the story basically just comes out of the places where I could see the tower. So the shot that you see at the end of the film, looking across the graveyard to the tower, that was the view from the bedroom window of a house I moved to in Leytonstone in the early 1980s. And I got interested in the building, wondering what it was and things. And then it's slightly autobiographical in a way. It's a bit like how, if you live in East London, the Gherkin kind of pops up everywhere. I wouldn't have thought it was over there. This happened to me with the Black Tower, so I was sort of triggered off the writing the story. But I wanted to write a kind of pastiche of a kind of mystery, little mystery kind of horror story, because I was interested really in playing with the kind of viewer's sort of psychological immersion in the film. Just briefly, maybe it's going off point, but the elements of the story come out of the places where I could see things. Yes, I could see it over a graveyard, so I kind of write about death. I could see it. It was in the grounds of a hospital, so I knew there could be sickness in it. I could frame it along some trees, so I thought the tower's going to go to the country at some point. So it was like this little puzzle of kind of, I could see it over a high wall, so I thought that could represent a prison and those sorts of things. So I kind of wrote this thing. But as I say, the details of the story were important. But I did want to make something which was kind of psychologically engaging. I had a kind of love-hate relationship with language, with verbal language. When I first started making films, it was at the time of when structural filmmaking was very dominant. The ideas around structural interiors filmmaking were very dominant in British art schools and things. And and kind of everybody around me was making work which actually drew attention. It was always drawing attention to its construction. It was anti-illusionistic. So it was actually making you very aware that you were looking at a film all the time. And not many people working with narrative. I actually really like storytelling. I really like how words can actually engage you and take you somewhere. But also I was very influenced by the ideas that were going around at that time, and still am. So I'm still always making work which actually makes you very aware of the fact that it's a construction. It doesn't just draw you in and keep you there. What I was trying to do with the Black Tower is sort of engage you and then push you away again. So sort of perhaps you're getting involved in it psychologically, and then you become very aware of it as a material thing, which is the way in which the elements are put together. It very deliberately has a lot of darkness in it. I'm really interested in the kind of idea of if we look at a film like this in a cinema together, it's a sort of communal radio, and I like that idea of everybody sitting and not actually seeing anything, but we're all together, we're looking in the same place and we're creating images in our minds. So it very deliberately doesn't give you a lot of the time. I made the film. When I was making the film, I heard about a survey that the BBC had just done, not just done, but they'd done in the 1950s, and they'd done a survey when children's television was first introduced, and children's radio had been around for a long time, but they were just starting to show children's television. They wanted to know what kids thought of it, and a very, very common response was, it's okay, but the pictures are better on the radio. And I kind of agree with that. As we all know, if we get involved in a horror film, it's always a bit disappointing if you actually see the monster. It's much better to keep things in your imagination. But there's a lot more I could say about that film. Maybe there's not much time, but just one other element of it. I was sort of interested in making something which. I like to make work which doesn't easily fit into any kind of particular genre. You don't sort of look at it and think, oh, this is this kind of film. So in this film, I was really trying to bring really different things together. So, at one end, the film is kind of quite a straightforward, linear narrative story, and then sometimes the imagery is completely abstract. It's used for being realistic of the story for being. And of course the ultimate abstraction in the film is basically when we're looking at black and we don't know what that black screen might be. It could be no image, it could be a night sky, it could be the wall of the Black Tower close up on a sunny day. Those things are exactly the same. So I was sort of interested in those sorts of elements. But I think it's probably best if I don't say any more about that at the moment. Hopefully, if anybody's got them, I'll just follow up when we can. So, two more short films. The next one is a very recent film, made in 2012, called Dad's Stick. It's just under 5 minutes long, very short. And then I'll finish with another film made in 2011 called Unusual Red Cardigan, which is 12 minutes. And then we can talk about these two films kind of have very little relation to each other, but I think they're both self-explanatory.
as red as you might think. The working class can kiss my ass. I've got the foreman's job at last. Your daughter on the stage, Mrs. Worthington. Don't put your daughter on the stage. Don't put your daughter on the stage, Mrs. Worthington. Don't put your daughter on the stage. Video has a very different kind of quality to it. I should turn my mic on again. Yeah, the last video has a very different sort of feel to the other work you've been watching, and over the last few years I've made some work which is formally very, very different from what I was doing before, in that since there's been sort of good quality portable video around, I've made quite a lot of works which are very much to do with the kind of immediacy of shooting a single videotape. So I've made quite a few pieces which are really to do with recording a moment, a period of time. And as you'll see, this is just a single shot with me filming and speaking at the same time. So I've made quite a lot of these rough and ready pieces, but this is a kind of one-off one.
I'm one of those people who spends too much of my time looking themselves up on the internet. And with my name, of course, if I just put my name into the search, I get quite a few million entries coming up. So what I do is I generally put in the titles of my films as keywords. And actually I do this thing called Google Alerts, where basically if my films are mentioned on the internet, I get an email from Google notifying me about what the web address is where the film's mentioned. So anyway, it must be about 18 months ago that I got a Google alert telling me that a VHS tape of my films was being offered for sale on eBay. So I was quite curious about that, so I looked it up and discovered that this compilation was being offered for sale. And what made me even more curious was that the tape had a reserve price of £100 put on it, which was a bit steep to say the least for an obsolete VHS tape. So I got very curious about who the seller might be, and looking at the tape here, there's not much clue as to their identity apart from a wardrobe and a black furry rug, but interesting to see that the tape's got quite a lot of dust on the top of it, so it probably hasn't been looked at for some time. Anyway, I wondered who this person was who was selling it, and the laptop's gone down. I wondered who this person was who was selling it, and I noticed on the page, I've never bought anything on eBay before, but I noticed that there is some information about the seller. So this person was called Seren or 4. Strange name. And also they lived in Maesteg, which found out from Google Earth is a quite small town in Wales. But anyway, made me quite curious about the person. And but then I saw there was something else where you could see the other items that the seller was selling, and so I thought I'd check that out, and I did that. Sorry, just need to change the page here. I checked out Serum 44, 148 stars. I guess that's a kind of some kind of approval rating, so I guess it means they're quite popular on eBay, I don't know. Anyway, sure enough, there were 9 results, and I started to get a better idea of who this person might be. So the first thing they were selling was some red and white cheerleading pom-poms. Just store there. And a handbag and some shoes. Resident Evil, great PlayStation 2. Back to some girly stuff. River Island blue handbag, an unusual red cardigan. It's probably a woman who was selling the stuff. And then a baby boy knitted jumper, 3 to 6 months. So. Called 4 must be a woman with a baby, and she had a green rabbit fur, as well as an Ultra 60 backpack for travelling. Maybe with the baby she won't need that very much at the moment. And then at the bottom of the list there's the Girl Chewing Gum, rare edition VHS compilation tape. So I got more and more intrigued about this person because I don't know, there wasn't really much that related to my tape that she was selling. But I started to feel this, I started to form a picture of her in her mind, and I got more and more obsessed with her. And I also wanted to see whether anybody would buy my tape, so I kept tracking the items that she was selling. And then after a little while, it was getting near the end of the bidding period, and I realised that a lot of her things hadn't been bid for, including my tape. But they were actually quite cheap, everything apart from the tape, so I decided that I'd try and buy some of her stuff. The auction came along. The auction, I guess there's an auction going on all the time. Basically, it got to the end of the bidding period, and I decided I was going to buy some of these things. So I hadn't bought anything on eBay before, so it took me a little while to get the hang of it. So I didn't actually get the cheerleading pom-poms. Quite a few things, and nobody bought my tape, unfortunately. Nobody seemed to think it was worth £100, so that remained unsold. Anyway, I've had this parcel now for 18 months. It's been, when it arrived, I sort of, I was a bit too excited to open it, so I didn't actually touch it. And this time went by, it's been sitting here for ages and ages and ages. It's taken on more and more potency for me. My first impression when it arrived, it looked like it might contain some body parts or something like that. It was quite a strange package, and it also occurred to me actually that didn't think about it until after I bought the tape, after I bought these things, that maybe the seller might find it a bit strange that one person bought a variety of things that she was selling, and a bit creepy really, and she thought that somebody was stalking her in it. And then it also occurred to me that I had to give my name as the person that she would send the stuff to. So anyway, it made me realise that there was probably some funny things went on in her head when she had this order for all these items, and I wonder whether it occurred to her that maybe the person who bought them was the bloke who'd made this videotape that she was selling. But yes, with my name, it made it more interesting, because as there are 11,000 of us in Britain, something like that, I think, she obviously couldn't be sure, but I guess she probably wondered about me, as I've been wondering about her. Anyway, I'll put this off any longer really now. I'm just going to have to open the package, I think. It's been so long, I can't actually remember exactly what it was that I bought, but I have felt it, and I'm pretty sure that it contains the Ottawa 100 rucksack for travelling. But I can feel some straps and things like that. But anyway, I'm going to open the package up now and see what's in it. So I'm just going to put the camera down on the table so I can do that properly. Moment of truth. All this time. First thing that strikes me is that the rucksack that I saw, I thought was blue in the picture. And you can thing here is something that's black. It doesn't actually code in like that. Maybe the picture was just a bit exposed. It's like, in quite good condition, isn't it? Because it wasn't expensive. Now opens, because this will actually contain some of the other items. Nicely packed up. Undo the drawstring. What we got? It's very hard. I don't know what this is yet. Green rabbit fur handbag. In nice good condition. Try and do that. Kind of handy. So, what's this? The baby boy knitted cardigan, 3 to 6 months. Still got the label, unused. Yep, 3 to 6 months. Space dog. Space, here we are. Space dog. Cut with the front of the cardigan. That's going to come in handy too. And something nice and soft again. Yep. This is it. It is the unusual red cardigan. I noticed actually from the internet that all of these items come from a smoke-free and pet-free home.
Okay, that's everything I'm going to show. Did anybody have any questions to respond to?
What happened to the Black Tower?
The Black Tower, right. Well, it's a funny story actually. I mean, I did a screening recently where I was showing quite a few films that were based around architecture. And I realised that basically everything I film seems to get demolished. So I haven't shot anything in London for a while. But it was quite funny with the Black Tower because my friends used to come around and see me in Leytonstone, and when you got out of the Leyton tube station and walked to my house, the first thing you saw when you came out of Leyton tube station was this tower looming in front of you. So a lot of people would come and visit me who had seen the film. And then only a year and a half or so after I made the film, it was demolished. So it was quite funny that people would come around to see me. They come and say, "John, where's the Black Tower gone?" So I'm assuming that it was demolished and gone to another place.
I just wanted to know if you ever actually ended up speaking to them, or if you ever did throughout the
Sorry, say that again?
I wanted to know if you ever spoke to the woman.
Have I ever done spoken to the woman in Unusual Red Cardigan? Well, that was that's the question was, had I ever had contact with the woman in Unusual Red Cardigan? That's a question and a half really, because the main reason the main work that came out of what you've just seen was actually a gallery show that I did at Pier in Hoxton Street, where I actually showed the prints from frame grabs off of eBay. So I was showing like kind of
made these objects, things that she was selling, these kind of iconic, monumental objects, and I also showed the objects themselves. And I was in a bit of a quandary about whether to contact her, but I kind of didn't. I kind of didn't want to in a way, because I thought maybe the project might go on. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. So the only reason I would have done it would be for sort of ethical reasons, wondering, well, should I contact the person? And then in the end I decided not to, because of the fact that I was only displaying things which were publicly available anyway. And in fact, the only person that doesn't remain kind of anonymous and uncontactable in the exhibition was me, because I showed a big print of the image of that parcel where you can clearly see my name and address and things. But what's interesting now is that if you look up Serempore 4, you can try it when you get home on Google, you'll get loads of stuff about my work. So if she does what I do, and does eco searching on Google, she will know all about it. I don't know, who knows? I mean, maybe other people aren't so obsessed with themselves about they don't look themselves up on
Just stumbled upon the exhibition, because if she had the video, then she might have got to your exhibition, and then she would have just got this entire exhibition is about me.
I'm sure we will meet one day, and it's going to be a great relationship. The exhibition was actually about kind of anonymity as well, and imaginary people, because I don't know if any of you have seen a film of mine that I deliberately didn't show today, because it's probably my best ever, called The Girl Chewing Gum. But in that film, I just filmed what was going on in the street in Hackney in 1976 and dubbed directions onto it afterwards. But so I just filmed people passing in front of the camera. And the film was called The Girl Chewing Gum, and there's a girl who walks in front of the camera for about 3 seconds and had a girl named after her. And, but she probably doesn't know about that at all. But that's kind of interesting that she probably may well still live in Hackney, and she was like an 18-year-old girl at the time, and now she's probably a grandmother. And maybe I pass her in the street, I wouldn't know. But because the woman who appeared to be selling things in the unoriginal red cardigan seemed to be a young woman, probably early 20s or something, I kind of confused her identity with the girl chewing gum, so I think he's going to cross over things in the exhibition. A bit like, I don't know if you know, you've seen Antonioni's film Blow Up, it's to do like looking closer and closer at a photograph, and I did this with a frame. I just zoomed in on the face of the girl chewing gum from one frame of 16mm film and blew it up to this point. You see this grainy image, which tells you, of course, probably less than people looks at us. No, that's right, yeah. I mean, my work is really largely led by technology, actually, things that become possible. And I kind of shift, I haven't shifted media very much. I've worked with time-based all my life, but so I don't. I'm only starting now to get a bit more of an allegiance to film, because it's like almost disappeared. I'm kind of thinking, well, I've got all my equipment in the cupboard, I could get out and shoot another film, but I haven't shot a film for a long time. When I started working with film, there was really the medium of video and film so far removed in terms of what they did, and if you're interested in the aesthetics of an image and wanting that, like an image which was sharp and clear and nice colour and things like that, there's no choice between film and video. So really, many artists, some artists work with who are interested in the image, very often work with film, and video was much more people who were generally working in performance or things where they wanted to record live events and things like that, which were not concerned so much with the aesthetics of the image. Which is why I hated it. I was very choice about it. And editing, of course, you know, with film you've always been able to edit accurate to 1/25th per second, 24th per second. Whereas with video, even in, I mean, it seems extraordinary now, but even in you know, mid-1970s, unless you had access to kind of millions of pounds of broadcast equipment, you were editing between two black and white reel-to-reel tape recorders, which had videotape on them, and you did your edits with a stopwatch. You had to, what they call pre-roll, so they had to set the player and record it at the same time, press a button. And if you got really good editing, you could make an edit that was accurate to about 1.5 seconds. So it's like if you were in any kind of precision in any way that it didn't work in that way. But I started working with video, well, this last one was a bit of an example, but I couldn't have made a film like that with 16mm very easily because I'd be carrying around all this bulky equipment. So when you started to get sort of good quality, very portable equipment, I started to make a lot of video. Now, interestingly, of course, is the size of the canvas, the standard size of the canvas has changed. It always used to be a 4:3 ratio. Probably some of you are sitting here thinking that picture was very square, because they're used to actually now seeing things in widescreen. So, we've now more recent work. Most more recent work I've made has been widescreen work with a 16:9 ratio rather than a 4:3 ratio. It's quite strange kind of adjusting to that different size canvas, but even that affects maybe what you actually decide to film. You know. Sorry? Yeah. I mean, I found myself recently, since I've been shooting stuff on HD video, all of a sudden I'm shooting wide shots of landscapes, which I never ever did before. You know, so not only does the format lend itself to a kind of panoramic view, but also, you know, you see more detail in the image than you ever could with the 60mm footage or standard definition video.
Do you have any upcoming exhibitions or like any more videos online? Because I couldn't find I couldn't find a field you can go on YouTube.
Sorry, I can't hear you at all. I don't know if
So any upcoming exhibitions or is there any more films online?
any upcoming stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Online as well.
Online you can...
Field chewing gum on YouTube, I think.
Girls Chewing Gum and Armour on YouTube, yeah. On my own website you can see a few pieces in their entirety, but lots of extracts. There's at least 20 films that you can see extracts from. The website's just johnsmithfilms.com.
You should go on.
Hmm?
You should go on eBay.
On eBay?
Yeah.
Do I still got it?
You should get your money.
Sorry, say that again?
She should go on eBay and get your money.
Oh, right, yeah, okay. I don't think I guess I know if she'd put it on sale again. But, it's quite interesting actually related to the kind of, the whole thing of like editioning artists' work now. But, because at the time that she was selling that VHS, I mean now you could buy a 3 DVD set of loads, about 20 years to buy work for 40 quid, if you wanted. But at the time that she was trying to sell that VHS tape, it was before these DVDs came out, so they didn't produce the tape anymore, assuming anybody wanted VHS. So you couldn't have actually got hold of the work. If you wanted, hire one of the films, it would cost, at least like £50 just to hire it for screening from Lux or distributor. So it's kind of weird, this thing of like, it's really expensive for a VHS tape. It's actually really cheap for an artist's edition work. So I think that's probably what was going on in her head, It's quite,
Do you guys can you see a narrative or work kind of is it kind of like a media thing? You do like hundreds of projects and make sure looking at these sort of end first. Is it like
right, yeah. Well, the Black Tower came out of, for example, that film, came out of like ideas for about 4 or 5 different films actually, and is that what you were asking about then? So these different ideas came together. So I wanted to film the Black Tower originally because it had this strange, non-reflective kind of black box on the top, which just was so unreflective that on a bright day with the sun behind it, you couldn't see the joints between the walls and the roof and things like that. So it just looked like this hole cut out of the sky on a plinth, so it had this kind of, it was a visual thing that appealed to me at first. And then the narrative idea came up. But the thing with, for example, you see the flat colours that turn into representational images, that's seen in the film. That's a film on its own. The parts where the seasons are changing, you're looking through the window of the tree, and the cars disappearing behind the tree, and things, that was going to be a film on its own. Over the course of making the film, Hackney Council decided it was going to blow up one of the first tower block in Hackney, and they advertised it, so I knew that was going to happen. So I went and filmed the demolition of that, and kind of, I just thought it was happening, and then kind of found a way to weave that into the film. So I usually find that I have an idea for something that I just execute in the beginning. Very often it's sort of, that's going to be good, and then you do it, and that's really crap. It's like, it's not enough to it. So I usually, very often, kind of build us on something. So I think it's all right. So,
Yeah, do you know
just mainly my hearing's so bad. It's not that you're asking anything weird. I got that, so it's really great. Right.
With the last piece, it kind of felt that it could have been entirely fabricated.
Yes.
Just false entirely.
Yeah.
It's like kind of an intention.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I make, in the same way as when I was saying that I don't like things that fit into genre easily, I very often make work which is entirely, it's entirely factual, but deliberately make it in such a way as you kind of question it. So I kind of don't want you to just sort of trust what you're being told, basically. And in fact, people who went to see the exhibition, which was actually quite a lot of work to set up, with printing and things, but quite a few people went to the store and said, "Oh, you made the whole thing up." So, but I like that, and I can deliberately kind of set up, situations in such a way as that, they're kind of, maybe you have some doubt about them. Basically, truth is, formally saying, truth is stranger than fiction, and it can be,
Hello. Yeah, so with a lot of your work, I get the sense it's kind of you're spinning a yarn with your movies. Yeah, at the same time, they're quite personal. So like, although they're kind of structured around quite an aesthetic experience, they're kind of, it feels like it's based on your own experience, like your own life. I was just wondering, and also to do with how they're made over quite a long time frame. I was just wondering, like, as you look back on your life so far, like, with your work, do you feel like you sort of, it's affected the way you live your life, the way you make your films? Like, do you kind of, is there, if it does, do you think it's, what's your opinion on, like, your art affecting how you live your life? I don't know.
Well, I think it inevitably does, and of course, I do quite a lot of things like this where I do a screening and I'm there, and I'm sure it affects one's life in many ways, but for me, one thing it certainly makes me very aware of, and a lot of films deal with it, is the passing of time. Not least because I'm actually a presence in a lot of my films, so I see myself. But the earliest there are a number of films I've made since probably I was about 28 when I first appeared in one of my films. I appear a little over time, and so I'm very aware of the time time passing.
Thank you.
That work is becomes more reflective in that way. I mean, maybe Dad's stick, the story has very much to do with looking back over generations and thinking about how things, basically how not just people but objects kind of become seen differently over time. So, with the end of Dad's stick, where you see that teacup, it was sort of quite poignant for me that I remember that pink teacup was a bone china tea service. It was my grandparents' best tea service. They only got out on a Sunday. My grandparents died in the 1960s, so we've got 50 years later that object still existed, and it was on its way to not existing. So it still had a function, but it was entirely different than what it originally was. The stick that my father cut through was extraordinary for me to look at it, because when I looked, sort of through the different layers of paint, I could recognise the colours of the houses that I'd grown up in, and quite away from the centre of the stick, there was this tangerine orange, which was absolutely certainly the hallway of the house that I was living in the 1960s. My parents. So it's at least 50 years of history encapsulated in something that's 2 centimetres wide. So that's a very potent thing. But I'm very interested in this whole thing of objects, the life of objects, really, and actually films become objects as well. Coming back to this film called The Girl Chewing Gum, I was talking about earlier, and that was made in 1976, just filmed in the street in Goldsmiths. And it had nothing to do with any kind of document at that time. It was a film which wasn't really about time, but it was to do with the set in the present day, and wasn't about anyone in the present day. And now when you look at the film like that 35 years later, it has entirely different reading, especially for people that are younger, but even for me, myself, it looks like ancient history. And in terms of a lot recently, I was quite amused to discover a while ago that that particular film, it's shot in black and white, and it's only 2 shots. And that particular film gets shown quite a lot in educational context, in schools context as well as art school context. So occasionally I might find a blog that a school student has written about the film, and I've been quite amused with this black and white film that I've read people saying it was made before colour film was invented in 1976, or it was made before editing got sophisticated, which is why there's only 2 shots. But of course, somebody who's 18, really probably 1976 in Boston, might as well be 1895. It really does, even to me, it looks like ancient history. The character, just one more time, the character called The Girl Chewing Gum, I noticed, and these things change over time, because the girl chewing gum herself wears these very high platform shoes, which were kind of very common at the time, in the 70s. And then when it got to, a few years later, whenever I showed the film, and she walked through the frame and had an audience, the audience would really laugh. Now they don't laugh, of course, because that fashion has kind of come back around again. We're quite familiar with it. It doesn't look that weird anymore. So it's kind of ups and downs of things that are interesting. So some of the back there, I haven't got a home hearing, I don't think. Can you shout really loud? No, absolutely, and I think it's sort of a magic. I think a lot of how we kind of, make art, also how we see art, is to do with imagining, isn't it? Like things trigger our imagination. But certainly, I'm always wondering about, the kind of people that I hear in film that I don't know, or that have some other kind of trace for whatever reason. Well, what I think she looks like. Well, Sarah Paul is really difficult to find out what she looks like, actually, because I kind of, I tried to do a bit more research and see if I could find her on anything other than eBay. And there were 2 other occasions that I found Sarah Paul, and I'm pretty sure it's the same woman, because she was based in Wales in both of them. Although I did find out, and English speakers here, I found out that Sarah Paul means purple star, which was rather disappointing because I thought it was an anagram of Signor F. Roper, or maybe Rose Promper, you know, I thought she was a copy that Rose Promper. But anyway, Sarah Paul means purple star. But I discovered her on 2 other websites, and one of them was what do you call it? A kind of bridal chaperone, not horses, weddings, and where women who are about to get married kind of give advice to each other. And Sarah Paul was replying to somebody's request, who sent in a photograph of the hairdo she was going to have for her wedding. She was saying, you know, what do you think of this? And Sarah Paul said, oh, it's really lovely, and I think it's great. There's just one other thing, just give you one tip. You know, I don't know if you've got your wedding dress yet, but if you haven't, make sure you get a size smaller than you are at the moment, because you'll definitely shrink into it by the time of your wedding. So, I thought, okay, that's the person who's got my video tape, definitely. But then I found that, so I had this image of this girly, very girly young woman. And then I found her on a kind of roller hockey site. And she was a member of a women's roller hockey team. And the women in this team had names like Tits of Steel. So it's like completely different image, you know. So, you know, so all of a sudden her blonde curls had turned into a crew cut, you know. So I don't know. I don't know. One person, okay. I'll have somebody close because I can hear it. You asked one before? You don't know, okay.
You talk about searching yourself on Google and also eBay as well, and how you're not so used to eBay. What is your view on YouTube and general video distribution through the internet? Instead of
What's my view on video distribution through internet? I think it's sort of complicated. I mean, I think it's becoming more complicated the way now that one can actually get very good quality images on, you know, on Vimeo, for example, you know, an HD, you know, full screen image can look better than a DVD, you know, so that changes things quite a lot. I've kind of always favoured the kind of viewing experience of particularly cinema, you know, also a gallery, but also preferably a kind of communal experience. Because for me, like, I know watching a film is very much, you know, about communal radio and that. Watching film, the enjoyment I get from watching a film is very often being in a room with a group of people, you know, not so people I know, but there's something kind of human about it, you know, to be kind of sitting together in a place and experiencing something together and sharing things with something. So I kind of don't want to, personally, I kind of don't really want to create rules of a world where everybody's just watching stuff on a screen, well, that's on a computer screen, well, that's a kind of very useful thing. But I find it a bit of a predicament. My own one now is actually I don't mind people seeing it in terms of what the image looks like on a computer monitor. But at the same time, I'd rather they actually saw it somewhere else. So I tend to just, personally, I just tend to put extracts of work online. Although people pirate stuff and they've got the whole film on, and I kind of don't mind. I think, okay, that's fate, they've done it. But I prefer it if we think of it as a different thing. I mean, for years and years, there's a good quality copy of it online now, but for years and years there was the only Girl Chewing Gum was online as a version that somebody filmed it on TV, on VHS tape, on French television. So it was like, with French subtitles and very, very poor quality and kind of breaking up every now and then, and the last minute and a half was missing. But I really liked it being there in that kind of form. okay, we'll definitely get an idea of that film. It's different, you know, it's not what I think to be. But I think it's hard. And maybe one, I think probably at some point I could just come to everything out of mine.
It's quite funny seeing the unusual cardigan video, and it reminds me a lot of kind of video blogs that people do pick up on YouTube. It's quite a different experience to watch it in a.
I should have already got that on, shouldn't I?
Tag or anything, so if you want.
Okay.
Thank you, John.